The sinking of the 160-foot Perini Navi Bayesian has taken the world by storm. And that makes sense. The story seems to have it all. Tragedy, a super yacht, a billionaire, a freak weather event, conspiracy theories, intrigue. But what stood out to me as I read the reporting on this yacht sinking was just how many apparent falsehoods were being reported and how misunderstood the yacht industry is. And while there's still so much unknown about the Bayesian sinking, I knew that at least some of these falsehoods needed to be addressed, which brings me to today's guest, world-renowned yacht designer and naval architect Bill Prince, who also happens to be my friend and an exceptionally popular Power Motoryacht columnist. I'm thankful to him for jumping on to help us separate fact from fiction. Before we jump in, just a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Volvo Penta. With over a century of pushing boundaries in the marine industry, Volvo Penta delivers reliable and sustainable solutions for boaters and marine professionals worldwide. From their industry-leading IPS system, offering superior maneuverability and fuel efficiency, to their innovative D4 and D6 marine engines, Volvo Penta has you covered. Experience enhanced features like joystick driving for precise control, and the fully integrated glass cockpit display for seamless navigation. Now, whether you're navigating calm waters or challenging the high seas, trust Volvo Penta to provide the performance and reliability you expect. Visit volvopenta.com to learn more about their revolutionary products and services. Now, on to our episode with Bill Prince.
Bill, how are you today?
Super, Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Normally I would say 95% of our conversations are usually veiled in sarcasm or just generally poking fun at either ourselves or our colleagues, but unfortunately not
mostly ourselves, right? It's
mostly ourselves. We give plenty of good material, but today, unfortunately, got you on for a story that really is not much of a laughing matter. The story of the sinking of the Bayesian. It's a 160-foot Perini Navi sailing yacht, and to be honest, it's a story that I've been wrestling with how to cover a little bit. It's certainly made mainstream news, and not surprisingly, it's got a lot of the good ingredients. It's got a billionaire, it's got a conspiracy theory, super yachts. I mean, mystery, deaths, you name it. I see why the world has latched onto it. I mean, let me just ask, have you as not only a boater, but yacht designer, naval architect, have you been sucked into this story as well?
Yeah, 100%. And more so from the fact that, I've been in this industry for, 30 years, plus I grew up as a kid on boats. And this doesn't happen. I mean, we don't lose 55-meter super yachts at anchor in less than 15 minutes. I mean, this is unique in the modern history of super yachts. And so just purely from a naval architecture point of view, a design point of view, but also from the human point of view, I've been as interested as anyone in the daily updates.
What is your overarching feeling? Because the one thing I have strong feelings of is it seems like there's so much misinformation and falsehoods or just a lack of understanding about our industry. I mean, are you getting that sense as well? You must be.
Yeah, I guess the biggest takeaway or misconception that I see is that there's some sense that these vessels are not thoroughly engineered and designed in the way that we know they really are. The level of engineering that goes into a structure like this that weighs over 1 million pounds, that has to be certified by international governing bodies in order to even be insured, those bars are set very high. So these are amongst the safest, most thoroughly engineered structures on Earth, which makes this the story, because if this happened every year, we wouldn't be talking about it this time. This does not happen under even extraordinary circumstances.
Right. It's true. It definitely seems like a lot of people trying to get their clicks off of this. I've seen countless articles of, questioning different design flaws to blame. Is there one accusation or one thing you've seen that's perhaps most egregious?
I would say that the crew was somehow grossly irresponsible here. I'm going to be very careful not to speculate or to, expand beyond the facts that we know. But it's impossible to predict a downdraft of that magnitude, or a tornado, or a waterspout. Even if the lowest hull opening was open, and I doubt, frankly, it was, having read the comments of the previous captain of the same vessel, that low opening was on the port side of the boat, where the boat heeled to starboard, and so the more the boat heeled, the further that opening would have been from the water. So, down flooding is a term of art in our industry that is almost certainly the cause of the sinking. So the question is, where did the down flooding begin? As a practical matter, a sailing yacht of 54 meters, 55 meters, is in some ways really a sail-assisted vessel. Of course, it has twin diesel inboards. It's got massive ballast, but its ballast ratio, meaning the weight of the ballast as a percentage of the weight of the entire vessel, is not as high as a 50-foot racing sailboat is. So it's on this continuum of being not quite purely a sailboat. Yes, it has a mast and sails, but it's very much a motor-assisted sailing yacht. So it doesn't and can't really have the level of reserve stability that a pure racing sailboat would have. A 50-foot racing sailboat would have an angle of vanishing stability of about 130 degrees, meaning here's your boat upright, here's your mast. The forces of the wind and the waves can bring that boat beyond 90 degrees, so the tip of the mast is 30 feet underwater, and that boat will have enough riding moment to return. This boat, being less of a pure sailboat and kind of one foot into that, motor yacht realm, if you will, with twin diesels and everything else, had an angle of vanishing stability probably the 75 to 90 degree range.
Okay.
The down flooding would have occurred most likely from the engine room vents and from HVAC vents, air conditioning vents that it was a hot night, the air conditioning was on. One of the misconceptions I saw early on was, oh, it's a hot night, the windows are open. You ain't never been on a yacht before. The windows are not open if it's hot. The air conditioning is on. So,
great point.
And 90% of all the windows on that boat, the deck house windows and the port lights, were sealed, non-opening windows, and they're not like windows in your house. I mean, these are tempered laminated glass. They're bonded to the structure, and they're very carefully engineered so that they won't just shatter when they're immersed by a few feet. So it's likely the boat down flooded through a combination of perhaps engine room air vents, the aft cockpit, which had some low wells, certainly on the starboard side. The lowest down flooding point on deck was a little cove there.
I want to get to that.
Right, the forward cockpit, offered, I guess, some opportunity for down flooding. But it's a very sad story, very unusual story, but it takes a 1 in 100 million shot like this to be hit with a specific downburst or waterspout that the vessel 100 yards away or 400 yards away was completely unaffected by, to make this happen.
Right. I guess that was a really great explanation about the boat stability. I've seen some of the better reporting putting into question the retractable keel. Saying the boat was at anchor, so the keel would have been lifted, and that would, in theory, as it's engineered to do, reduce its stability. Do you think is that fair to say that that's a probable factor?
It's highly likely and undoubtedly a contributor to to minimizing the ultimate stability of the boat. Now, a vessel like this comes with very thorough documentation from the naval architects and from the builders. They have stability booklets and stability procedures for at anchor operations, underway operations, under propulsion and under sail. And it was, according to the previous captain's writings on this topic, understood to be a normal, safe operation to have that lifting keel up at anchor. Granted, the lifting keel is 45 tons, 90,000 pounds, and to have that weight up, I think that the lead ballast was 200,000 pounds.
I think so. That sounds right. 30 tons or something?
No. The fixed ballast of the boat was over 200,000 pounds.
Okay.
The lifting keel was like 90.
Okay.
So it was far less than half of the ballast. Now, this was the only of, I believe there are 9 of these boats built, the Perini Navi series. I've been aboard one of them. But this was the only one that was rigged with a sloop rig with one mast.
That's right.
As such, that boat had additional, I believe it had an additional 200,000 pounds of ballast beyond what the others had. So the 90,000 pounds in the lifting keel was not the sole ballast and the sole driver of stability, but it did reduce, marginally at least, the stability at anchor. But again, who could foresee being struck by such a violent downburst or tornado?
Hey, can I ask a question just for clarification, maybe for the audience, and a refresher for myself? The purpose of such a keel on a sailboat like this. Do you mind giving us just a brief one-on-one? Why would a boat have?
I mean, any sailboat has, airplanes have wings in the horizontal direction and they provide lift vertically. Sailboats have wings in the vertical direction and they provide lift in the horizontal parallel to the water, right? So the sails and the keel act as foils in the same way that airplane wings act as foils, and they provide lift this way to move the boat forward. Another crucial role, of course, of the keel is to provide the ballast to counteract the moment, the force of the wind on the sails, of course. This boat drew 30 feet with the retractable keel down. You're not going to get to many of the world's cruising hotspots if your yacht draws 30 feet. So clearly it was designed to have that retractable keel to get into many other destinations. It's also been reported frequently that when the keel was down, it made a bit of a rattling noise that would bother sleeping guests, which is probably why it was up as well, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, I know this is a little bit speculative, but do you believe if it was down, maybe that would have been enough? I mean, it's so hard to say, right?
I can't speculate that, but if it was down, the boat would have had
better chance,
a marginally better stability, and would have been able to recover from a steeper.
Right.
And boy, it would be dangerous to say one way or the other for sure, but
right.
Yeah. I mean, if they knew what was coming, they would have put the keel down and they would have made sure all the guests were awake. But how do you know what's coming like that?
Right. And all the recent reports are pretty clear and pretty unanimous that this wasn't a predicted weather event. There were, so that it definitely came up by surprise. I guess maybe the next misconception I'd like to ask you about is the sinking time. There's been a lot of headlines that are, this boat went down fast. I mean, and objectively, it did. I mean, I've heard different reports, but it seems like 15, 16 minutes seems to be a consensus. And a lot of people are speculating that is not possible. I mean, where are you landing on this, naval architect?
So back to the level of engineering safety that each of these boats has to be built to. The boat had 6 watertight compartments, and as is regular practice, again, to meet classification rules, when we design vessels of this size, we have to demonstrate that they can survive a flooding of 2 of these 6 compartments without sinking. And in this case, the 2 aft compartments were the lazarette and the engine room. There was a watertight door between those two because the engineer's cabin was in the lazarette. Okay, fine. Let's assume that door was open, which it probably was at anchor.
People were coming and going.
Then there's a fixed bulkhead between the engine room and the owner's stateroom with no door whatsoever. So it's impossible to breach that bulkhead. So if we assume that the engine room and lazarette, let's say, were flooded, maybe down flooding occurred then into the main salon area, which then flooded forward, potentially into the guest quarters. And, then that might be all she wrote because the boats they can't be designed to survive just, catastrophic flooding of half or more of the compartments.
This podcast is brought to you by Volvo Penta. With over a century of innovation under their belt, Volvo Penta understands what it means to provide people with the power that can take them as far or as deep as they want to go. With enhanced features like joystick driving and the fully integrated glass cockpit display, they help to provide you with solutions to navigate the path ahead. Trust in Volvo Penta to provide the reliability and performance you can count on. Visit volvopenta.com to learn more.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's a great clarification. So just to be clear and reiterate, you are not surprised by that timeline.
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't really answer your question. Timing. It seems pretty quick. It seems very quick. If you flooded 2 compartments, again, the boat could remain afloat indefinitely. So clearly the 3 or more compartments were flooded in very short order.
Yeah.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning. The guests are unfamiliar with their surroundings. The crew is more familiar with the boat because they live on it.
Yeah.
A guest might wake up and their whole world is at 90 degrees. They don't know where the door is. The door might be up there.
Terrible.
And, you would think that 12 to 15 minutes would be enough time to get out of your cabin and find your way on deck. But if you can't get to your door
right,
until the water's flooding your compartment and the lights are out, because probably you have no electricity at this point once the starboard side of the boat is submerged, you're a sitting duck if you don't know where you are and you can't get out of the cabin.
Bill, I think the way you just described that hell that they would have went through really kind of helps for me humanize this story. I mean, because I know it's, you got a tech tycoon mogul, whatever you want to call them. These were people that were, in a truly awful situation. You really kind of painting that picture of what they would have been experiencing. That is kind of an angle or a reality I don't think many people are thinking about.
Yeah, I think maybe the most chilling detail that I've read is that 5 of the victims were found in one portside cabin that was said to be uninhabited by the guests. So obviously the port side would have been the high side of the boat. They either found their way, by swimming to the port side cabin, or their bodies were rushed into that cabin by the force of the water. The young woman, unfortunately, perished alone in her separate cabin.
Oh, that was the daughter?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
But 5 of the bodies were found in one otherwise unoccupied portside guest cabin.
It's really sobering reality, and I think an important perspective to remember that these were, you look at some of the hate and some of the irresponsible comments and reporting, and it's like these people lost their lives in a really terrible way. So I appreciate you bringing it back to the reality. I would like to jump back just to the cause, because I think there's, that's where so much of the speculation is and the mistruths and stuff. But I can't help but look as a layman at the aft cockpit, maybe as a source, because you look at, that looks at maybe the one design element that surely looks to blame. So at the hull level on the starboard side, there was stairs that went down into a sunken
yes
cockpit, which is not unheard of. It's not, it's a probably unbelievable space to be in perfect conditions. But that certainly, again, from a layman, looks like.
Yeah, it's probably, the door, the open door, literally or figuratively, that may have, contributed. In any event like this that's so rare, there had to have been a chain of multiple, acts of nature and human error. Maybe not even error, but, decisions made out of ignorance of what was about to happen.
Sure.
No one expected that a yacht of that size to heel over 75 or 90 degrees in a storm.
At anchor.
At anchor. Yeah, right. But certainly you are right that is one area of the design of the deck that will be closely scrutinized. This is going to be the story of the year in the yachting industry, for the next year.
Yeah.
And there will be, eventual design ramifications probably that will come. And again, I want to stress to the listener, the viewer, that these boats are not designed haphazardly. I mean, tens of thousands of high-level engineering hours go into each one of these.
Yeah.
This is not, the SS Minnow, right? We're not, right? These are thoroughly engineered boats, and it takes an extraordinary act of God.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of hubris on the part of crew or guests to combine forces for this to happen.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I guess one of the last points I want to kind of reiterate, there's so much, who's to blame, right? So now today's headlines coming out of the Times and many outlets is, the captain's under investigation, and, fine, probably everything should be investigated at a tragedy at this level. But I guess from where you're sitting, where do you fall in the blame game?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I almost don't want to answer that for fear of having to replay this in a year. And, Bill, you screwed the pooch on that one, didn't you?
Right. The first time, Bill. It's
I agree that, it's the crew's professional duty, first and foremost, to ensure the safety of the passengers. So it's responsible to look into all of the crew decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know which watertight doors may or may not have been open at the time. We need to know if that tender garage door was open.
Right.
We need to know, a number of those things. Was that main salon door open? It's heavy enough that it would open by itself.
Sure.
It heeled over more than 20 degrees. So almost certainly that door would have just fallen open under its own weight, because why would you lock that door? It would almost be more dangerous to lock guests into a boat in case there's a fire and they don't know how to unlock the door.
You're right.
So it'd be hard to blame crew for not, manually locking the passengers into the vessel in the overnight hours.
Right.
Although it's likely that door may have contributed, to enough down flooding to sink this boat. So I'm not sure I want to assign blame. It can't be a single. These boats are too many layers of safety. It can't just be one decision that did this. It had to be the freak storm combined with other factors that were human decisions.
Yeah.
Maybe human error, maybe not human error, but certainly human decisions in in a vacuum as far as their awareness of what was about to happen with the weather.
I think that's well said. And perhaps I should have phrased the question of, maybe it would have been easier to say who's not to blame, and to try to pose it like that. But I think that was really, really well said. I know as a boat designer, safety, and from reading all your columns, I mean, safety is top of mind when you're designing any boat, and whether that's you're looking at hull windows, and I mean you have an eye for these things, and you kind of touched on it that there might be some ramifications. Is there any effect that this sinking has on you as a designer, and something that maybe you're starting to think about as, I don't know, an element that could have prevented that, or something that you might think about in your own line of work?
As marine engineers, naval architects, and yacht designers, we deal with down flooding on a daily basis. I mean, I was working on some down flooding calculations for a much, much smaller boat this morning. We have helped production builders with very, very good reputations solve some down flooding problems before they ever happened, on boats in the 40 to 70 foot range, here in the States. Down flooding calculations are central to what we do in every vessel design. I can tell you, for example, that imagine a typical 45 foot center console, a new one, that might have air conditioning vents at the exterior helm, right? Might be air conditioning, at your chest level or at your knee level. Those are down flooding points. Imagine those air conditioning vents just below the steering wheel, and the boat takes on significant water. That is one of the first down flooding points that can dump water into a boat. So we're very sensitive to that when we design boats of all sizes. In a sailing vessel of this size, it's a bit of a dichotomous situation, because you need to be able to, heel the boat over to go sailing, but you also need substantial engine room air, in and out to let those twin engines and 2 or 3 generators in the engine room breathe like they do in a power boat. So to combine, hull side engine vents with the ability to sail close hauled is a real challenge for the designers of these very large, ostensibly sailing boats.
I love that you pointed that out. I mean, are there any, when you're doing those calculations, do you keep in mind the fact that it does seem as if we're seeing more and more severe storms and severe weather? Does that?
No, we have more and more media and more video cameras. So every event gets recorded. Strangely enough, I kid you not, 3 hours ago I'm looking out at Lake Michigan here, the endless horizon of water and sky. We had a mini water spout pass right over my office and went out to the lighthouse. Very small, only blew down a tent at the marina office, but I have video of it and I posted it on Facebook, right? So every single event gets, publicized around the world, and there may or may not be any more of them, but there's sure a lot more eyeballs on everything that happens.
All right, but I'm gonna be devil's advocate, because you've been in that office for how long, and how many other water spouts have you seen?
14 years.
And all right, 14 years.
That means they're extremely rare.
Exactly. All right, fair enough. It's a good point. Well, let me ask you one last question, Bill. Outside of your day job, you are an avid boater. You're out there all the time with your family. Is there any lesson there, or any kind of takeaways that you have in your mind that might affect your boating?
I've been thinking about that, because we just returned from an 11-day family cruise, and my son, he brought his girlfriend along for the first 5 days, and so there's a heightened awareness on my part that I'm not only responsible for the safety of my family, but for someone else's daughter too. So we did a little beyond the normal safety stuff before we left. I made sure that she knew how to find and use a fire extinguisher, and she knew where her life jacket was, and all that kind of stuff, flares, stuff like that. But in light of this, I'm still thinking about how this is going to affect, the typical 40 to 50 foot, production boat. We've gone so far out of the way to make sure every single boat has folding topsides to make the cockpits a third wider than they ordinarily are. And yes, they're self-draining and all that. We designed those too. I mean, we know how it works. But for the first one of those that goes down because somebody left the hull sides down and the hatch to the seakeeper open or something and something else went wrong, that's a potential hotspot for the production boat industry.
What a great point. Never thought of that. And that's a huge trend right now.
But again, responsible engineers and responsible builders make sure that with those hull side doors open, that's just a completely floodable deck, and you could park it under Niagara Falls and it wouldn't sink. But again, if you've got some combination of hatches that are open, or some event that knocks that boat 90 degrees, and you get down flooding through the air conditioning vents underneath the steering wheel, it's just something to think about. These are very, very rare circumstances, but it did happen in spectacular fashion here, so it's too bad.
Now that's Bill, you gave a lot of great perspective. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything else that you think is worth clarifying?
Yeah, I would say to the general listener, reader, that whether or not you have a lifetime's worth of boating experience, don't let this one freak event color your perceptions of the professionalism of highly trained crew, the degree to which these boats are engineered for safety, and don't let it color your perception of the likelihood of this happening to you. You see one plane crash and you say, well, I'm not going to get on an airplane. Well, that logically just doesn't make sense, because air travel is statistically the safest form of transportation. Don't let one globally publicized freak tragedy scare you away from going to sea. Just let it tune up your sense of safety and self-awareness, maybe just a little bit.
Bill, that's what a great perspective to end on. I mean, you think about, I love the airplane analogy, and how many yachts are out there on the oceans that never have anything like this. So to have, and like you said, this is such a freak event. This is such a freak disaster, and not to take away from what we know to be one of the best pastimes out there. So
that's for sure, Dan.
Excellent. Well, Bill, hopefully next time we're going to do this at a boat show with a cocktail and a much lighter topic. But thank you so much for.
We'll make fun of each other on the next one.
That'll be perfect. It's going to be a 5-hour podcast. But Bill, thank you so much for your perspective and your insights on this. I really appreciate it.
Man, appreciate it.
I'll talk to you later, Bill. Thanks, man.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
This episode was brought to you by Volvo Penta. Whether you're cruising calm waters or challenging heavy seas, trust Volvo Penta to provide safe, innovative, reliable marine solutions made to move you, wherever the journey takes you. Visit volvopenta.com and explore their innovative marine and industrial products and services.